Hey, everybody, and welcome back after a long summer break. Welcome back to the Loam podcast, a conversation we are having on what it means to live and embody a more beautiful gospel. I am Anthony Parrott, and I am joined by my co-host, once again, Pastor Reverend Tonetta Landis-Aina. I'm back.
Hey, it is good to be back.
How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm doing really well. I just, a month ago, got off of my summer sabbatical, so I'm feeling a lot of energy, probably annoying you a little bit with all the energy that I feel.
So much
Let's
energy.
Strategize.
Yeah, so much energy. You even downloaded a new app to try, Obsidian. Which the Tonetta from pre-sabbatical would have never.
Yeah, he tried to get me to use a Mac computer, and I said, "Get behind me, devil! The devil is a liar." Okay, that's who I am.
The very first temptation was to eat that apple in the garden, and Tonetta said no.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to say this at the top of the episode, just in case you don't hear it at the end. If you ever want to send in feedback, you can email podcast@loam.fm, and you can ask us questions. You can give us your thoughts on podcast topics and ideas and what we've talked about. We like talking to each other, and also if we're just shouting into the void, we don't need to record it. So podcast@loam.fm, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, tell us what you want to hear more about, what you want to hear Anthony get on some soapboxes about, what you want to hear me ask a bunch of questions about. So, yeah.
I do love a good soapbox. You know, one of my literal soapboxes is that my soap comes in a box.
Oh, my God.
And Emily's soap comes in these wrappers. And, like, the wrappers are just so annoying. And, like, a box, you can recycle it. It's easy to open.
So yeah, folks, this is what you can hear more about. Okay,
this is why you have to email, so that you don't get me talking about literal soapboxes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are going to spend some time today, mostly me kind of interviewing about sabbatical, and I think our last episode was a little bit of what you were hoping for and expecting, and the importance and rest and all of that. And now we want to come back on the other side and talk about the realities of stepping away from a job for an extended period of time. And we also want to talk a little bit about what it's like doing ministry in DC right now. Because I don't know if any of you have heard, but DC, it's an interesting place.
It's a hotbed of interesting. By that we mean mess.
As we record this is the first full day of the federal shutdown, and of course, throughout the year, people have lost jobs, and
we've been occupied.
We've experienced all sorts of ICE raids, and just a few miles south of us in Quantico, the Secretary of Defense and the President gave a very disturbing speech. So there's never. Well, yeah, I mean, on a serious note, like Emily and I talk about this every night, of just like the hits just keep on coming. There's always a fire hydrant of bad news. So with that, let me ask you some questions. What were you hoping for when you planned the sabbatical, and what actually happened?
So I think that what I was planning for and hoping for and what actually happened aligned pretty fairly well. So I was hoping to spend more time with my children. My daughter is 3. This summer, she was on the cusp of going to school in DC. You can go to school at 3, PK3 they call it. And so, I just really wanted to spend more time with her. I wanted to spend some time considering home and what home is. If there's a theme for my sabbatical, that's kind of what I wanted it to be. It was home. We've had a bunch of moves in the last 5 years, and so feel like we've landed in the house we're going to be in for a while, and so wanted to consider, like, what is home? I knew I would do and wanted to do a lot of just, like, organizing and that kind of thing. And I thought I would do some, like, a bit more of, like, organizing my email and those kinds of things. So that is what did not happen. Kind of like the tech side of things I wanted to do, like organizing email. And there are a couple of other, like, projects I thought, like, if I could get this going. Like, I wanted to organize.
My sabbatical, I had my stupid little projects. Like, I cataloged my entire library. Which was a waste of time, but also kind of therapeutic. Did you have anything like that was like in reality really sort of pointless, but also felt good?
No, not really. I think,
Okay.
I mean, so I wanted to do a lot of reading. So I did a lot of reading. Um, I think it took me longer in the day. I was surprised at how good I am at puttering. So, so my goal every day was like, there is a point where I've done some practical things just around the house, things my wife needs me to do. And then I get to a chair and I'm just in the chair. I can read music in the chair or listen to music in the chair. I can read books in the chair. I can do a puzzle, but I'm just resting and doing something I wouldn't otherwise have time to do. So I think most days it took me longer to get to that chair space than I thought it would,
Yeah.
out of like just wasting time or continuing to complete like practical projects.
I do
So I
want to
think that
say
was
within the first couple weeks of sabbatical, uh, our family stopped at your house to drop something off or maybe drop one of our children off. And so this is like on a Sunday, it's like afternoon, and I step in to your house and you are there in a bathroom, like
oh
just
yeah.
full on 110% sabbatical mode.
I am good at puttering. So my first like true adult experience with sabbatical was when I was a teacher. I taught for 8 years in Fairfax County Public Schools, and school started at 7:20, and by a.m. and by Friday, I would be so tired. And I finally realized, like, when you go out with your friends, you just embarrass yourself. You say ridiculous things, you regret, whatever. So I started intentionally staying home on Friday. Like I just would not go out on Fridays. Um, and yeah, it just became this really restorative time of, from what I got home at like 4 till midnight, I would read and putter. I would put on my ugliest bathrobe and I would walk around with a glass of wine. I hope I can say that. And just kind of be. And it was so enjoyable. So yeah,
If
my
that's
Sunday
if
mornings
that's
were
the
definitely
thing,
that.
if that's the thing that pushes our audience away, then I'm sorry, not sorry.
No. But yeah, yeah, and so I just really like, especially on Sundays, leaned into that spirit of like you're gonna have on your fuzzy bathrobe, you are gonna just relax and pray and be, and Sundays were glorious. Yeah, and so that day you came out over, it was so funny because I think you also had on like a blazer and a collared shirt, so we were like like complete contrast to one another. Um, but yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think mostly I did a good bit of what I wanted to do over sabbatical. It was fun. I haven't fully finished this, but I wanted to do some reading about place and home in terms of place. And so in the part that I did get through was reading about like the garden as home and thinking about
Mm.
like cultivating earth and how that connects you to place. And that was all actually really, I'm not a gardener, but it was really helpful for me to think about like what are the ways that I'm interacting with the earth as I create home.
Did you get your hands on some loam?
No, I did not. Great question. What is loam, Anthony? Can you remind us?
I wish I could remember. It's a certain kind of special dirt. Things grow in well. I think it's the mix of like what organic material that's aerated, and it's a place where things can grow really well.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, not a gardener.
Yeah. 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 So it was
Sabbaticals
a good time.
sabbaticals are supposed to be restorative, and the summer in DC has been intense. And I'm curious if any of the chaos happening in the city that you call home ended up showing up in your rest and in your home as at all.
That's a great question. Yeah, I feel like no, not a lot did. I feel like we had my wife just had a busy summer at work, but it was not connected to all that's happening in the city. And I would say when in August, when things really started to kind of hit the fan, I'm going to be honest, I kind of intentionally hold up because I knew that there would be plenty to do once I got back in September. So yeah, both through intention and just the way our lives are in this season, I wouldn't say that there was a lot that touched me from
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah. Uh, do you wrestle with that at all? Progressive faith communities, they often emphasize being present to suffering. So, how do you reconcile the call to step away with the call to be present with suffering? And even more pointedly, like, what does Sabbath mean to people who are hurting?
Yeah. So if I'm just totally honest, like I don't really wrestle. I feel like I say this a lot. I'm a Black queer woman in America. I feel like there is a way in which the world, just yesterday, I went shopping and I had this very interesting experience with not being really helped. That had to do with my gender identity. It was really interesting. So I feel like there's enough of that that when I have a chance to try to step away, I do.
Yeah.
And there's not to say, like, there was plenty of anxiety in our
Yeah.
household. There was plenty of like knowledge of what was going on. But I think I honestly didn't feel guilt because I feel like I won't survive if I just stay present to it consistently. And I think
Yeah.
as pastors, when I am doing the work of ministry, I'm hyper aware of
Yeah.
people's anxiety and what people around me need, what's happening in my neighborhood. And so to step out of that just felt really, really healthy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your second part about yeah, I think, and so here's what's interesting. Even this morning I was praying and I have a lot of excitement and energy now about strategizing and thinking about church and all these different things. And yeah, I felt tension with, the government shutdown. And I also know that if I don't lean into places that give me energy and life, I cannot be present well where there is suffering and hurt. Like if I just say, oh, that makes me happy and gives me joy, I should lean away from that because of how, I think I need to feel a certain way because other people do. I cut off my own ability to kind of have a deep well. So yeah, I think there's definitely tension, but I don't feel like many of us. Mary Oliver has this poem, and it ends something like, "Joy is not a crumb." Like it's
Mm.
not something that we have to constantly feel like, oh, I can only feel a tiny bit of this, or the scales have to balance out. There's so much suffering in the world and so much
Yeah.
grief that I feel like when genuine joy happens, it is almost always appropriate to lean into it. It's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good word. Yeah. Because I think there is a sort of, I don't know, performance oriented. We could both get on our own soapboxes about how capitalism turns us into human doings and the need to perform constantly. And yeah, there is this, we're in a historical moment as a country where the needs are, if they're not in fact greater, then they're more visible than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way
And
to put that. Hmm.
then we can sort of get into a treadmill, a deceptive treadmill that says we just have to keep sprinting. And yeah, I think you said it well, that if you cannot care for yourself, then you're not going to actually be of service to anyone.
I mean, I feel like, let's just take the United States. All the folks on the underside of the history of the United States, you'll hear me say this over and over again, I'm sure. The people that survived are people who managed to, figure out like it, people often think like, oh, like this group of people is really in touch with like the arts and, like Black folks and dance or Native folks or Latino, whatever. But it's because they learned to cultivate these arts that were connected to joy, like dance and song, and we could go on and on. But I really think that that's true. Like there's just a history of like you didn't survive if you didn't find outlet.
What's the quote about like we do it for the dance?
Oh, it's a Dan Savage quote.
The AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. And it was the dance that kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for.
Yeah. And the reason, actually, I've used that quote twice now in sermons, and I love it so much because for me, it always reminds me of or connects to that T.S. Eliot poem. It's in Little Gidding, I think, where he says, at the still point of the turning world is the dance. And he's talking about the Trinitarian dance. And so this idea that at the heart of the Trinity, there is joy and love and mutuality. I love the way that Dan Savage quote connects this, like what we're doing in terms of dance and joy to something that is at the heartbeat of the world in the life of God. That is what we are fighting for. That is the overflow we're fighting for.
What did you learn about yourself as a leader when you weren't leading?
The most probably nourishing, I guess, part of the summer for me was I practiced a lot of silence, which is not kind of part of the religion that I grew up with necessarily. I grew up in more like Baptist-costal charismatic spaces, where there's definitely mysticism, but it was not in usually silence. And so yeah, just like cultivating most days, just sitting in silence, learning to, having these joyful moments of, oh, I'm somewhere else. I'm at shopping. I'm somewhere else. And there's a moment of silence and I'm like, oh yeah, God is here. That connects to the silence that I felt when I was in my own home, and God is present. I think was just really, really joyous. So I think I learned much more practically about the beauty of silence. I think I learned about myself as a leader. So I need to practice more silence. But I also realized that for me, the Bible it is so intertwined with what I do for my job. Yeah, that it's sometimes just hard to just lean in a way that is lighthearted. Like pretty early in sabbatical, I started I love doing Lectio Divina. And I would start doing, and I'm like, oh, but I should go study this passage too. And then I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's really hard for me just to show up to a passage. And I think that that's something I realized, like as a leader. I mean, I think I knew that. I've read about, it's so tempting to kind of use and manipulate spiritual habits when you're a pastor. But I think I really felt the toll that preaching consistently from the Bible. And again, this is not because I don't love the Bible or like I love studying it, but it is so associated with work in my body that I realized I have to really cultivate some other ways to disconnect the Bible from what I do. So that was like hands down probably the biggest thing I realized. Did you have any revelations like that? Your sabbatical was 3 years ago, but I don't know if you remember anything like that you learned about yourself as a...
Around the time I did a sabbatical, 2 summers ago, was also the first time Emily and I stopped leading a small group and coming out of sabbatical and joining up with a small group led by other people. And hello, small group. If you're listening to this, you're lovely. And it's taken me a long time to learn that you are lovely because I had a hard time not being in charge. And I don't know if I've said this on this podcast or not, but like I have basically 2 modes of uninvolved or in charge. And that's a problem. Like that is not a particularly 3-dimensional experience as a human being. So yeah, I have to learn to be okay with other people can lead. And they could lead in ways that I wouldn't do it or I wouldn't concoct on my own. And it's not going to hurt me. So yeah, that was one of the big lessons.
That's good. I love that. Mm-hmm.
Did anything surprise you about what you missed or didn't miss about ministry?
The biggest surprise for me was I really thought on Sundays or Saturdays, I'm going to go to synagogue. I'm going to visit houses of worship. I'm going to be out and about and gathered with people. I love being gathered with people. I'm going to learn about church structures and how other people do things. No, I didn't do any of that. I just wanted to be at home and pray and listen to gospel music, which is what I did on Sundays. And that's what I did. My family went to church and I just bathed in the silence. I really thought, and I do feel probably a little bit of guilt because I do have like a list of churches and leaders I just want to connect with in the city and in the DMV that are doing really cool things that I didn't connect at all. So I think that, I think I preached about this, but that it gave me a lot more, I guess, understanding of people when they like want to stay home some and pull back and those kinds of things from church. Because I can get in that, like I was raised like you go to church, that's what you do. It's where you are on a Sunday. So it gave me a lot more respect for that desire to step away. Actually, my favorite comment when I spoke about how, like, oh yeah, I understand our congregants so much more, how they want to stay home. And someone said to me after church, they said, so now what you think is that we stay home to pray? I'm going to just tell you that might not always be what we're doing, just to be clear, which I was like, that's also fair. I love that. Yeah. So I realized like my entire life, I have been in gathered church spaces and I found it so refreshing to be out of those.
Yeah. Which is often, I think, good advice for all kinds of people that the time to step away is okay. And I think it's unrealistic and unnecessary that you have to engage in the same constantly, incessant. And yeah, I think I could probably list a dozen examples, biblical examples of, yeah, not even the saints of scriptures do the same thing every single week forever and ever. All right, if it's okay, let's transition from sabbatical into what it's like doing ministry in DC right now.
Literally right now, yesterday, right now I'm off on Tuesdays. And I decided that weekly I'm going to take out one of the rest deck cards from Trisha Hersey's, who she did Rest is Resistance. She wrote that book. I think she's still active on IG and all of that, but she has a rest deck. So I took out a card, and the card said, "Rest is my foundation to build, invent, restore, and imagine the world I want to see." So I think it's interesting to come out of sabbatical knowing that rest is the foundation. Yeah, and also to be at this place doing ministry now where it feels, yeah, I feel again somewhat guilty. Like part of me feels like I need to carry this sense of sabbatical, with me. Like it's really important to kind of hold that rhythm in some ways, maybe not quite as slow as it was, but like to hold some of that lingering and wondering and all of that. And I know that rest is the foundation to all the creative work we need to be doing in DC right now. And yeah, I feel a lot of tension when there is so much that could be done and should be done. I just very practically with, now government workers, needing support financially and in all kinds of other ways. There's so much to be done. So I think I pretty immediately do feel a tension around what it means to do ministry well in the city.
Yeah, I was meeting with another pastor in the city, Justin Fung of Christ City, DC, and he was talking about how do you stay awake but not alarmist. And yeah, there is a rest is our foundation, and also stay woke, like stay aware, stay awake to what's happening. Yeah, there has to be a rhythm between that rest and the awakeness.
Yeah, and I was reading something very random. And anyway, it was just these like one-liners of life advice. And one of them was just that action is often the antidote to anxiety. Mm-hmm. And while that is not always true, and obviously there are levels of anxiety and all that, but like I think that is a word that I need as somebody who can be very much in an ideas world. And we're thinking about things to just step out and try something, even if it's not the perfect thing. So yeah, I think a lot about what it is to take good action, right-sized action that fits like what you're able to do.
Okay, so let's continue on that. You and I have had conversations about what our congregation needs. Are we activists, or are we shepherds? Are we mobilizing, or are we creating sanctuary? Like ours tend to lean into resistance and justice work, but our own congregants are the ones who are exhausted or scared about rent and mortgages, or having to take protective measures to making sure that they or their friends or their neighbors aren't getting kidnapped by ICE. So how do we discern between prophetic action and pastoral care, and what's the intersection of those? Because those two aren't opposed to each other.
I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, you're not going to answer it for us? Come on.
I know. Like that's the because I mostly feel like I want to know what you would say to that, because I mostly feel like there's just a rhythm to it, and it is just discernment, and that's why it's important to have different kinds of leaders in a community. Because I'm the kind of person, I'm always going to be leaning in one direction. Maybe you're leaning in another direction, maybe some other leaders. And we need all of that. Because then if we don't have, the people who are showing up to care and be present and gentle, and you don't have the people who are like, okay, also we can't just be gentle. We got to go do some things. So I don't know. I feel like so much of that is about diversity of community and letting people actually, like, developing people in their gifts and letting people actually use their gifts. Because I think if you have a decently thriving community, where people feel like they can be themselves, you probably will,
Mm.
and respect each other as who they are, then I feel like you actually will probably get a decent rhythm and balance of those things. I mean, I think, if I get up there and preach about resistance, then I get feedback and somebody says like, "Oh, here's what that made me think of. That led into care." So and then I need to listen to that person to like, okay, so I talked about resistance. How do I also make sure I'm giving equal time to care and, thought to care and equipping people for care? So I don't know. I think the problem comes when you have communities that only, they don't have enough diversity of voice and action in their midst. What do you think?
No, yeah, that's great. That's really, I think that's really perceptive of one, any justice work. It's like, are there any examples of justice work that has not been sustained by community? I seriously doubt it. It has to be done within community, and that community has to be diverse, like truly diverse in some way. And all of the great organizers and activists talk about the sort of spectrum of kinds of organizers and activists that you need. You need your educators, but you can't all be educators. You need your disruptors, but you can't all be disruptors. You need caregivers. You need people who can write and people who can lead a chant and people who can, you just need all of that. I think a problem that churches can get themselves in, and probably any community that can have a tendency towards like charismatic leadership, and as much as we try not to, we can't pretend like there's not some amount of charismatic leadership happening in our church. But any organization that has that will accidentally sort of recreate themselves just over and over and over again.
Yeah,
And what
yeah,
we have to do as leaders and pastors is to make sure, like, no, we are intentionally pulling together the people who are smarter than us or more capable of us at all of the things that we aren't doing. And to not sort of say, like, well, my one way of I write well and I speak well and I can galvanize people around an idea, but I can't lead a protest. So therefore, nobody should lead a protest. Like that's bad leadership. And the sort of you have to do it like I do it. That's what gets you into a real problem.
yeah. And you know what this makes me think about, Anthony?
What's
It's
that?
just, and this is my sense. This may not be, I don't know how accurate it is objectively, but my sense is that progressive churches, liberationist churches, have ceded some ground when it comes to developing people's spiritual gifts.
Mm,
Because I think even, I mean, I'll say this is true. Like, even the only ways that I've been in churches or seen churches develop spiritual gifts this is from my church history, is in ways that are very kind of one sided. They're very much like the spiritual gifts, that Paul lists, but not connecting those spiritual gifts to practically how they show up, how they might show up depending on where your privilege is or how much privilege you have, using social justice frameworks to talk about gifts, like marrying kind of all those things to talk about gifts development. I feel like is something that, I feel like our church needs to work on it, but probably lots of churches like ours to say like, no, yeah, you have gifts. You have gifts to activate. Don't be afraid of that. You don't have, I mean, I do speak in tongues. You do not have to speak in tongues. If you know that's not what that has to mean for you. It
yeah,
doesn't, or, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Are you ready to come out as someone who speaks in tongues on this podcast?
I just did. I don't know that I meant to do that, but I definitely speak in tongues. I don't,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not often because this is one of those things like I've been threatened to be educated out of, and I've had to come back and
Mm,
realize like this is actually pretty important to who I am and who I see myself as.
yeah.
So I'm trying to push back that threat and speak in tongues occasionally and those kinds of things. But yes, I guess I did come out, and National Coming Out Day is coming up next, or it's
There we
coming
go.
up soon, so we can come out on a number of things. There
There
you
we
go.
go. There we go. We'll
What do
publish.
you need to come out on?
Oh, geez. I mean, I've been known to have a prayer language or two, like.
That's great.
Well, that to say, how do we not squish that right on out of us?
Yeah. Yeah, I
I,
think that's true. I think, and how do we, as leaders, make sure that we're always putting folks up front to lead. That doesn't have to be on Sunday morning, but up front in general, that that have that lead in very different ways. Because that's how people really learn that their gifts are accepted. So they see somebody that shows up in a way that the pastor doesn't show up, or doesn't show up with the perfect charismatic prayer, but stumbles. That's when they realize, oh, my gifts are accepted. So how are we always putting those people at front and saying, yeah, this is a total. I have a good friend, and her the way she prays is she says, "Hey God." It's very conversational. That's her way, and like it's really liberating for people to hear her pray because they realize, oh yeah, but the way I pray is also valid. So yeah,
Which we're getting in some tangents here, but yeah, that's when people complain about the messiness of church. Are they complaining about things that are legitimately harmful, or just they don't reach the level of excellence or perfection or some imaginary standard? Because those people were never allowed to take up space in a room or on a platform, or not just talking about Sunday, but how you show up in the community or whatever.
and to get back to your original question about ministry in DC, I think I feel this from time to time. This sense or wondering, I guess, a wondering about whether we should just all be in the streets. I'm sitting at my desk. You're making sure comms things happen, or doing these different planning, making sure the Christmas parties. There's all these things to ministry that just take you sitting at a desk and doing very unsexy kinds of things. And so sometimes I just am like, oh, am I just supposed to be like, that kind of Jeremiah is, the Ezekiel energy where you're just like in the streets doing some kind of sign that no one understands, but is disruptive. Yeah. And like, to what extent I feel that tension all the time. And particularly as a person who I already know my inclination is not toward any of that. My inclination is in the world of ideas. And how do I both accept my gifting and know like I need to be responsive to that question, weekly, like where am I supposed to be in the streets?
Yeah. But it can't be, this is 1 Corinthians 12 stuff. We can't all be ears. We can't all be hands. We can't all be cooking our food over dung fires like Ezekiel. All the great civil rights movements needed people doing administrative work. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. If you're going to host we've talked about this before, if you're going to host a bus boycott, you have to figure out, okay, how are people going to get to work then? And that takes administration.
Did you just let me off the hook? Is this the moment? Is this the public moment?
And you need people in your life to say, are you using that as an excuse to not get on the streets?
Okay, see, I thought that was the moment, and then there was an and.
I'm preaching at myself.
Yeah.
Before we go, any things that you read, watched, listened to that you need to let the audience know about before we go?
I'm trying to have more weekly points of whimsy, particularly on my day off. So I was reading, this was not the whimsy part. I'm reading this book about the spirituality of abolition. And at the beginning, the co-authors talk about how they're really like Craig on the Creek, or Craig of the Creek.
Okay.
It's a Cartoon Network show. It's like 11-minute episodes to think about community. And so I watched an episode and it was so great. And it was like, this is the joy I need in my life. It was really, really wonderful. So that is the thing that I have recently taken up, that I'm very curious, like what theological and ecclesial connections I'll make. And you?
Our comfort watch over the past couple months has been the 2020 remake of the show All Creatures Great and Small, which is about a veterinary practice in Yorkshire, England, leading up to World War II. And the moral quandaries of the show are like, do we tell the farmer that their cow is going to die, or do we let them, like, there's just like the world's least important moral quandaries, and it is a relief in light of everything else. And we blasted through like 5 seasons of it in a couple weeks, and now they're coming out like episode by episode again for season 6, and it's just it can't come out fast enough.
Wow. Unexpected. You're just always blowing our minds, Anthony. Always blowing our minds. Well, all right. I think that will do it for another episode of Loam. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at loam.fm. You can watch You can find me on Instagram sometime, occasionally at Tonetta Landis. You can find Anthony most places online at Pastor Parrots. You can submit your feedback and questions to podcast@loam.fm. We'd love your feedback, your questions, and we'll get to those in a future episode. Until next time, bye y'all.